Rising Star.
Morning, members. We're on to the 10 a.m. agenda. We have before us Vermont Citizens Advisory Committee on Lake Champlain's future. Could you please introduce yourself?
Yes, good morning. My name is Karina Daly. I am the chair of the Vermont Citizens Advisory Committee on Lake Champlain's future. I live in Jericho, Vermont, and I am the environmental scientist representative on the committee. And we have with us 3 other members online and 1 in person. And the goal today is to introduce you to the Lake Champlain Action Plan for 2026, which I have put in front of you as a document. And I'm going to give a brief overview on the committee and our charge, and then I'm going to pass it along to other members of the committee to share their expertise on certain priorities within our action plan. So who we are a 14-member committee, Citizens Advisory Committee, composed of 10 Vermont citizens, made up from diverse representation, both geographically across the Lake Champlain watershed, and representatives from industry, science, advocacy, and really across the board. And then we also have 2 state representatives and 2 state senators and 2 state representatives. We were created in 1989, and our legislative charge was to basically serve as a liaison for issues regarding Lake Champlain to the public. So we learn about those issues in our committee. We meet monthly, and then prioritize those issues and comprise the Lake Champlain Action Plan, which we present to the General Assembly on an annual basis. Our issues focus on water quality, wildlife habitat, flood resilience, and human connection to the landscape, so public access. What else? Yes, we have, so in addition to the Vermont CAC, there is also a New York CAC and a Quebec CAC. So it's really designed as a citizen body surrounding the whole lake to guide the lake itself. And I also want to say that although these issues are focused on Lake Champlain here today, I think a lot of these issues are representative to other watersheds across the state. So I recognize that many of you are not within the Lake Champlain Basin watershed, and that's okay because I think the issues really transcend those watersheds. So it's really just to share those issues with you and learn about them. And I will say that Lake Champlain Basin does comprise more than 50% of Vermont, the watershed itself. So it's a really big watershed in the state. So it sometimes may feel distant here in Montpelier, but we flow directly to Lake Champlain. So with that, I will pass it over to Breck Bowden to introduce our first priority, which is flood resilience. Breck, you're muted.
Yep. Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Great. Thanks for the opportunity to speak with you this morning. My name is Breck Bowden, and I regret that I can't be with you in person today. I'm a retired professor of watershed science and planning from the University of Vermont, and I was director of the Lake Champlain Sea Grant, a NOAA-funded program that focuses on improving the health and the environment and economy of Lake Champlain. I'm a member of the Vermont Citizens Advisory Committee from Burlington, and I'd like to guide you through the first of our 4 top priorities to advance flood mitigation and climate resilience. You can find this priority starting at the bottom of page 2 on our action plan. As you know, Lake Champlain is a large lake, but the land area that drains into it, its watershed, is much larger, in fact, unusually so. Thus, any large-scale activities on land eventually affect Lake Champlain. This can be a challenge, but it can also be an opportunity. Over history, our activities on land have severely stressed the lake. Compounding these challenges, more recent climate change is multiplying the stresses on the lake. In the last 15 years, the Lake Champlain Basin has been impacted by all 25 declared FEMA disaster events. In fact, during that period, Vermont experienced the 7th highest number of disasters in the country. This includes the multiple floods that we faced in 2023 and 24. And then more recently this year, the basin experienced severe drought and record-setting low lake levels. As the frequency and severity of extreme weather events like these increase, swift action and investments are needed to ensure our communities, environment, and economy are more resilient to climate change impacts. While these are daunting challenges, management of our land activities and landscape characteristics also present important opportunities. Paraphrasing our action plan slightly, we suggest 5 high-level opportunities that will help address flooding impacts. First, restore and conserve headwaters, river corridors, floodplains, wetlands, soils, and riparian buffers. Second, invest in our agency staff and empower them to work across agencies and outside organizations. Third, support funding for research and implementation that will restore natural stream processes that will keep Lake Champlain healthy. Fourth, invest in sustainable agriculture, forest, and working lands initiatives that reduce phosphorus runoff to our waters. And finally, invest in public and private infrastructure to meet modern standards and withstand future flooding. Let me focus briefly on just 2 examples that may relate to deliberations in your committee. As one example, agriculture often comes under fire as a source of problems that threaten Lake Champlain, particularly for losses of sediment and phosphorus from farm fields, which may ultimately create harmful cyanobacterial blooms in Lake Champlain. But farmers are concerned about water quality too and want to minimize these losses as well. The erosion of nutrient-rich soil is a significant economic loss for farmers, and spreading manure that has been diluted with rainwater on wet fields presents serious operational problems. So programs and practices that help farmers reduce soil and nutrient loss would be welcomed by everyone. State funding to support these programs and implement these practices is essential to sustain our vibrant local farm economy and to reach our climate and water quality goals. This need has become more urgent because of reduced federal support. Our committee thinks that the Farm Security Act, S60, passed by the Senate last year, is a good way forward. The Farm and Forestry Operations Security Fund created by this bill would help farmers recover from weather disasters like floods and droughts, and in doing so would help to protect Lake Champlain. As a second example, let's consider the transportation sector. There's ample evidence that nature-based solutions are cost-effective measures that mitigate the multiplicative effects of infrastructure development and climate change. Examples include efforts to right-size culverts and bridges, dam removal to restore aquatic organism passage, and flood restoration to increase flood resilience and public safety. These are often complex projects that require substantial funding and collaboration among state agencies, local organizations, and communities. Investments in these approaches would help to address several of the opportunities that we identify in this flooding priority area. A good example is H467, currently in the House Transportation Committee, which would require the Agency of Transportation to help municipalities upgrade infrastructure, improve stormwater management, develop a system to track flood response equipment across the state, and procure equipment to remove debris that would otherwise get into rivers and eventually into Lake Champlain. As you deliberate on these and other bills, we encourage you to consider the strategies enumerated in Vermont's Resilience Implementation Strategy. Any bills that advance these strategies would advance our action plan to help protect Lake Champlain. Thanks for your attention to this first priority to our plan, and I'll now pass the floor over to Bob Fisher, who will address our water contaminants priority.
Hello, I am Bob Fisher. I am the Water Quality Superintendent for the City of South Burlington, and I am from Barry. I have raised my family. I have 4 Spalding graduates, 3 UVM graduates. The oldest is a doctor at Dartmouth and a University of York graduate. I have a lot of money on Parent Plus loans. Regardless, I am here to represent the municipality somewhat. I'm here to speak on contaminants, especially chloride. I see us following the same exact path as phosphorus. You know, I run large wastewater facilities, except for this is going to impact a lot more people when we put a lot of phosphorus things on, in fact, wastewater, some farms, etc. But this will be something really we'll see. There are 5 impacted streams already. I was a former federal fishery biologist many years ago. They are already reaching critical levels for the macroinvertebrates. EPA will step in. There will be a TMDL, like on Sunnybrook. You could stop putting salt down now. It's all legacy salt, even just like phosphorus. It's going to continue to go up. I'm mostly here to ring the bell, to say that I'm not really here to advance things. New Hampshire has a program. A lot of it is private salt. You know, if you own a mall, you fall, break your leg, they sue you. You know, New Hampshire does have a program where the state takes on some of the liability if you go through a training. But mostly is to say that, you know, it's getting very salty out there, and Colchester would have Sunnybrook in it. Same as South Burlington has too. You know, I'm not saying just to stop salt. I am also a Killington freestyle coach for 26 years, where I have 1 in the Olympics this year, and I had 2 in the previous. I drive 107 down to Killington every Saturday and Sunday, except for during Irene when I had to go for 26 years. So, you know, I see the value of not crashing into people. Nonetheless, my first house was in Lake Tahoe, where I lived out west for 12 years, and you could see an Eastern car from a mile away, which was mine, generally, because it had rust all over it. So just putting that out there, that it's coming, you've got to do something. You can't just stick your head in this sand. Beyond that, I would mention PFAS. I run the 2 wastewater facilities. We provide a 5% mix with our biosolids. I tie air quality and water quality together. I basically put out drinking water, and when Lieutenant Governor did a tour, I drank the effluent, which I probably do, and I wouldn't recommend that. Nonetheless, it is basically drinking water we're putting back into the river. When the river turns chocolate, it's just a lot of money. It's just gone nowhere, since I'm putting out 0.03% of the flow. Nonetheless, I'm very proud of my staff and all that we do. We put out 0.04 phosphorus from both facilities last year. That's about equal to maybe 10 failed houses of septic systems, and that's 24,000 people we take in Colchester also. You got every American male, is the average American male poops about 1 pound a day. Female are about the same, but they're slightly smaller. You have to be about 186 pounds. I'm probably quite a bit above that. And it's got to go somewhere. So currently, you know, your options are landfilling, but Burlington goes to Chateauguay, but they're going to close that down. At the moment, like I'm saying, I go a 5% mix. I go 5 miles down the road to ECI. We test every 1,000 yards. B-Trans uses it as a fertilizer on roadways. It doesn't go anywhere near people. And we've never had a hit above background levels. So it's less, you know, it's equal or less than normal soil background levels. And you can stop, but then I'll have to haul it all the way to Coventry or somewhere. Huge greenhouse gases. You'll have to pull in phosphorus from trains on Canada or somewhere. You still got to grow the grass and stuff at a park and ride or an airport. So that's another one of my sticks. And we have limited time, so I will move on to our next person, which would be
I believe it's Laura.
I believe that is me.
Yes.
Andrew. Okay.
We'll have time for questions.
Yes.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Okay, thank you. Hi, my name is Andrew Milliken. I am a citizen member of the CAC from Charlotte. I'm an ecologist recently retired from a more than 30-year career with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And I am going to talk a little bit about our priority related to aquatic invasive species, or AIS. As I think you probably know, AIS are a significant threat to Lake Champlain, as well as to other water bodies in Vermont. AIS impact native species, aquatic ecosystem integrity, recreation, water quality, infrastructure, and ultimately property values. And once AIS or aquatic invasive species are present in the lake, as you can imagine, they're very difficult to remove and very costly to manage. So it's really important that we try to prevent them from getting in to begin with. And that spread prevention relies on early detection of species and the pathways in which they are coming in, rapid response with partners to all new threats, and a really widespread public education program to make sure that users of the lake and neighbors to the lake are aware of the AIS issue and what they can do to help prevent their introduction. Lake Champlain currently has 51 documented aquatic invasive species. And while that may sound like a pretty high number, our neighbors, neighboring water bodies have even higher numbers. The Hudson River now has 122 documented aquatic invasive species, and the Great Lakes tops them all with 184 documented aquatic invasive species. So, and just a little bit more detail, in Lake Champlain, the breakdown of those 51 aquatic invasive species is 13 of those are plants, 36 of those are animals, and that includes invertebrates, and 2 of them are pathogens. And I'm happy to break that down even further if you're interested. Just to give you an example of the pathways of introduction of aquatic invasive species, I'll talk to you about the recent round goby that has become a threat to enter Lake Champlain. It's a species that was introduced from Eurasia through ships that came into the Great Lakes and then discharged their ballast water into the Great Lakes. And from the Great Lakes, the round goby migrated through the Erie Canal, down the Mohawk River, and now to the Hudson River, where it's in the vicinity of the lower locks from the Hudson into the Champlain Canal. So it's right knocking at the door, as it were, to Lake Champlain. It has not reached the locks in the Champlain Canal, where it is in the Lake Champlain watershed yet. So there's a huge effort to try to prevent that from happening. One thing that's also happened with the round goby, I think it's the first species where we've been able to use environmental DNA or eDNA to actually track the progress of the species. And you can do that simply through water sampling. And that has really introduced this new approach of using water sampling in the lake to really understand the distribution and presence of other aquatic invasive species. So to address this, Vermont really should continue to increase its investment in consistent staffing and funding for its aquatic invasive species programs, including for management and for monitoring, boat launch stewards at all of the key boat launch stations, boat wash stations, and making sure that these complement and that we are able to complement and influence the cooperative work underway in New York and Quebec. The state should also consider a new funding source involving a mandatory boat decal program for motorized and non-motorized vessels. This is similar to programs in Maine and New Hampshire that have been implemented. A mandatory watercraft inspection and certification program, and comprehensive watercraft decontamination stations placed around the state, including high-profile stations at key access points. And Vermont really needs to keep up its strong partnership and advocacy with New York and Quebec for the management of the canal systems, which are the major entry point for AIS into Lake Champlain. And finally, we think that VTrans should be encouraged to partner with Vermont DEC and Vermont Fish and Wildlife Department, as well as the Lake Champlain Basin Program to strategically locate decontamination stations on roadsides throughout the state. Really make it a much more visible program that gets our residents and visitors aware of and helping to address this issue. And with that, I will pass it to Lori Fisher to talk more about expanding equitable public access and recreation.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today on behalf of the Lake Champlain Citizens Advisory Committee, and apologies for not being able to join you in person. My name is Lori Fisher. I'm a CAC member from Williston, having served on the CAC for several decades, and I'm the recently retired executive director of the Lake Champlain Committee, a nonprofit dedicated to lake protection and stewardship. The Vermont CAC views investment in recreational access to Lake Champlain as essential to stewardship, equity, and the lake's long-term health. Access is both a matter of geography and equity, where access exists on the landscape and who is able to use it. People protect what they know, and they can only know what they can reach. When Vermonters can walk a shoreline, paddle, fish, or swim, Lake Champlain becomes personal, and that lived experience builds care, responsibility, and long-term public support for clean water. Equitable access to the lake is also critical to Vermont's economy. Outdoor recreation accounts for roughly 5% of Vermont's gross domestic product. That's second only to Hawaii and continues to grow. Sustaining investment in recreational access to places like Lake Champlain, while also expanding non-motorized and low-barrier shoreline opportunities, supports Vermont's outdoor recreation economy, reduces user conflicts, broadens participation, and strengthens stewardship. Lake access in Vermont is managed by multiple state entities, including Fish and Wildlife and Parks and Recreation, each with different mandates and funding structures. Vermont Fish and Wildlife in particular is funded through a combination of federal dollars, the state general fund, and department-generated revenues such as fishing and hunting licenses and boat registrations. Because a significant share of both federal funding and license revenue is tied to motorized and traditional uses such as hunting and fishing, this structure has understandably influenced how access sites are designed, managed, and prioritized. At the same time, license sales have declined and lifetime licenses have reduced annual revenue, even as recreational use of the lake has increased and diversified, and management responsibilities have expanded beyond what those traditional funding sources were intended to support. Access must also be truly accessible. Cost should not be a barrier, and access should not depend on owning a car or a boat. Walkable and bikeable access points, free or reduced fee options, and simple shoreline facilities are essential if all Vermonters across income levels, ages, and abilities are to build lasting connections to our waterways. Geography matters as well. While there are multiple Vermont state parks along the northern and central portions of Lake Champlain, the South Lake, and that's the portion of the lake below the Champlain Bridge, has no Vermont State Park. Although this is a more rural region, the people who live there still need reliable public ways to access the water. Addressing this gap is critical to achieving equitable stewardship across the entire lake. If we want a cleaner, healthier Lake Champlain, we must ensure that people can experience it firsthand. Stewardship begins with access, and access requires intentional, ongoing investment. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just close. I did want to direct your attention to the Venn diagram on the front of the action plan, which I really think highlights the complexity and interconnected issues that face Lake Champlain. And I think it's a really good description. And I also wanted you to see on the second page in the dark blue here, this column, these are all of the other, the ideas and priorities in this action plan are not new. And a lot of these ideas have been identified in the past and have been topics of our action plan in the past, and they align with many other planning documents within the state. And those documents include the Vermont Conservation Design, the State Wildlife Action Plan, Vermont's Climate Action Plan, and the Governor's Resilience Implementation Strategy, and Lake Champlain's Opportunities for Action. I also passed out, I didn't have enough copies for all of you, so I apologize, and please share, and I will deliver some more later today. But the State of the Lake report from the Lake Champlain Basin Program for 2024. So that's an additional document and has a lot of really great resources in that as well. So that came up as far as questions and other testimony last week. So I wanted to share that, but thank you so much for your time and happy to answer any questions if they come up.
Okay.
It's Representative Voss.
Okay. I thank you so much. I haven't been able to sleep knowing you guys are coming into testimony. It's so exciting.
Thank you.
So I live in Colchester. I live right on the bay, and I've just seen a huge increase of moorings kind of spreading out through the bay. And I know that's not your jurisdiction, but just wondering what your thoughts are and if you're concerned as I am.
I think that's a really good point, and thank you for bringing it to our attention. I wonder if I know both Breck and Andrew have boats on the lake. I don't know if you guys can share anything about the increase in moorings on the lake.
Obviously, there's wake boat issues.
Right, and there's wake boat. I
Yeah.
was gonna ask about
Yeah.
that next.
Yeah, I will mention that the town of Colchester did a carrying capacity study, but it was, I think, several decades ago, and that has not been revisited. So I think it would be valuable if a new assessment was done. I'm not aware of an increase in the number of moorings there. I know that one of the marinas extended its number of slips, and there was a replacement of a lot of moorings that were in front of the old ISS club, if you recall. But I think some of the greater concerns are some of the shoreline development that's likely to occur as a consequence of the new sewer line that went in there. And as Bob mentioned, the increase in the use of wake boats and the impacts of that on the shoreline. I don't want to dismiss the moorings question. I think that's a question that ought to be revisited. What is the carrying capacity for the bay?
And just on the wakeboards, I noticed I was reading something with it. There was a public comment opportunity, and they weren't calling it wake boating anymore. It was like kind of water or activities. There's a new name because there's so many. I feel there's new activities besides wake boats on the lake. And one of the things I noticed was that they have to be cleansed. And I was wondering if that's a different type of cleansing than all boats need to be cleansed with that come into, let's say, Malice Bay or a new body of water, or is that the same thing?
My understanding is that's the same thing. If as is done by the stewards at the boat launch locations, but if someone else has more information, please add.
I'll just add that I think it is the same program, but I think it also points out a real issue, which is it's not just the introduction of AIS into Lake Champlain. It's the 51 species in Lake Champlain being spread to other water bodies where those boats go after they are in Lake Champlain. And so those boat wash stations are really critical. sometimes more so for the boats coming out of the lake than as well as those going into the lake, because that can be a real problem.
And I also, we had someone from the Responsible Wakes Vermont Lakes present to the CAC. And in that presentation, we learned that the ballast water from wake boats really is hard to empty entirely. So that water that is, once the ballast is filled, it's really hard to decontaminate that. So that water, that is another added risk with the wake boats. But it's interesting you mentioned the new name, so I'll look into that.
Representative Tagliavia Phillips.
Is there any research or does anybody know about something that could be added to the residual water in those wake boats to decontaminate, something like peroxide?
That is a great question. Good idea. I have not heard of
chlorine,
anything.
obviously.
Yeah.
Don't want more chloride,
Right.
but peroxide
Yeah.
possibly.
Has anyone else heard of anything related to that? I had not.
I'm not aware, but we will absolutely follow up and let you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not aware either. I do know that in terms of the wash stations, having high-powered and hot water is really critical, and those are the most effective decontamination stations. And what we have now, there's a dramatic range from garden hose to those high-powered stations.
Just to follow on, the reason I brought up an oxidizing liquid was maybe just to be able to pour a certain amount in and let it slosh around to get into the hard to reach areas. That's the only reason I brought it up.
Representative Pritchard.
Yeah, so thanks for your presentation. So I'm looking at your handout here, and I just have a question. On the south end of the lake, because that's in my area. It looks, it talks about, I know the Medowee and the Polteny, so that's the main feed on that end down by Whitehall. And I'm looking at the phosphorus, and it looks like this trend was from 91 till present. That's 30 years. And there's no change. That's a heavy ag area, which really, are we not testing that water? And I think that would be crucial. And if we are testing that water over this 30-year thing, really makes me question. I really wonder how much phosphorus is created in that area. I mean, out of all the places, except for maybe moving up towards Orwell and Benson, which is still in this area, it's heavy ag. And, in a lot of testimony I've seen, farmers are questioning ag's the problem. We've got a 30-year trend here that shows nothing. It shows things are good all the way through. So my question is that input being tested? Has that been tested? Because it's a little contradictory on if you go from page 5 to page 15.
So I would off the cuff say that that would be a Vermont DEC question, because obviously we don't do the testing. And once again, this would be somewhat of a guess, is that it could be somewhat related to the success of wastewater. In the last, once the limits came in, 65% of the phosphorus going in Lake Champlain, and the 85 was from wastewater plants. Now it's 3%. There really isn't much down there.
But wastewater is irrelevant in this section of the lake.
That's what I'm saying.
Has
So
nothing
you
to
may
do
have
with it.
seen the reductions from the other place, a lot of that driven by the wastewater reductions. While there is very little wastewater introduction here. I mean, I'm not saying for sure, but I can say that it's gone, the Tetra Tech study from 3 to 4% of the input is from wastewater now. It was 65% in 1985. There probably was very little wastewater impact there. So once again, you'd have to talk to DEC and their scientists.
The reason it stood out to me was because, if this was a 6 or 7 year trend, I could maybe accept that, because this phosphorus removal is is, you know, the action that's put in has changed that. But 30 years, it really makes me question the severity of it, at least down in that neck of the woods.
Could I just make a comment just with respect to if it's being measured, it is. So that whole part of the lake has been monitored. That's why we have this data available. Just to be clear, are you looking at figure 7 in the State of the Lake report? Is that?
I'm on page 5 under clean water, and it breaks down Missisquoi Bay, Malice Bay, Main Lake, and South Lake, which would be, you know, South Bay and Whitehall, New York, up through Benson Landing, up up Orwell. It's all the narrows of the lake.
Unfortunately,
Heavy
I'm
ag.
looking at an online version of this. I'm not sure we're looking at the same thing, but I would draw your attention to figure 7 in the State of the Lake. It's within the clean water, within the nutrients section, and it shows an image of the lake with a whole bunch of grass around the sides. And I see South Lake B on there, and you'll notice that there is a dotted line on all of those graphs. That dotted line is the TMDL level, and you'll see that in recent years that the South Lake is peaking up above that level. So there are concerns about phosphorus getting into the South Lake area, and that it is above what the TMDL recommended levels are. To answer to one of your questions, phosphorus in the lake and phosphorus in the tributaries coming into the lake has been monitored over those 30-year period of time. The reason that it is reasonably flat, or a reason that it is reasonably flat, may be that we are implementing agricultural practices that are intended to control phosphorus to the lake. So maybe that's good news. But the fact that it's still peaking up above that dotted line, and so we have those orange peaks in there every once in a while, suggests that we still have work to do to bring phosphorus down.
Yeah. But seeing this, it kind of contradicts itself in a way that this, you know, this report. And I would just say that, again, this is a 30-year snapshot. Is that not true?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yeah. I do wonder if that's why the EPA became involved. I haven't been in the committee long, but I'm wondering if that's why the EPA got involved and insisted that ag not be, you know, regulated by agriculture, but by the ANR. Does anybody know if that was an issue because of the phosphorus in the Southern Lake?
Maybe answer.
Oh, do you know?
Yes, I definitely think that is why, you know, we're looking at the CAFO permit now for concentrated animal feeding. Certainly the condition of the lake has been an issue, and ag is one of many sectors that are contributing to the problem. So we're working on how best to manage those discharges.
I just thought it was a very bold move to move it over to ANR, and I was thinking that there's somewhere an issue that's not getting resolved. And when you look at, you know, charts, it is ag. I'm not blaming anybody. It's just, you know, best practices, you know, definitely need to be implemented.
Right. And I should mention who's on our committee, who's not here today, is Hillary Salmon from the Pulteney Meadowy Conservation District. And she could give you a laundry list of all the good things they're doing down in that part of the lake.
Oh, I'm aware of,
Okay,
she
good.
does great work.
That's great.
Yep.
I would just like to say that it's all of us. It's not just ag. That's for sure. It's all of us. Many inputs, many sources. And sure, we all need work, but ag, you know, I want a Vermont of concentrated urban areas with farms and, you know, around us. I don't want New Jersey with sprawl everywhere.
Mhm.
And I continue to see that. 55% of Vermont are on septic. That's the highest in the nation by percentage. And it keeps going up because a lot of people aren't building in. They're building these giant big mansions up on a septic tank. Well, that all goes to wastewater plants, 99.3%. I think they're going to close the last field, 100% go to the wastewater plants. So it's their problem too. You can be like, oh, I'm not involved. But, I can put filters on, all sorts of things. We continue and improve our treatment. We put out very good treatment. But if you're on septic, you're basically just, hope the soil means it. That's it. And hopefully you got good soil and it's not a failed system. Very quickly, Lake George, who had money, that's the first time I've heard of this. They did a survey of all the septic tanks along the lake. By standards, I've been seeing this since the 80s, 10 to 15% are failing by federal standards. 53% failed on the initial time through. These are all extremely expensive houses, a lot of them pretty new, right on the Lake George shorefront. 53% failed. So, Mallett's Bay Sewer is a very good thing,
Mhm.
even if it is coming to my facilities, which
Thank
is
you
more loading
very
to
much.
me.
Thank you very much.
Representative North, and then Pritchard.
Thank you, Chair. Bob, I have a quick question for you about the municipal wastewater facilities. Thanks for the good work you're doing. Thanks for getting the phosphorus from 65% down to 4% in terms of the TMDL. Question about what all contaminants do you test for, though? Clearly, you're testing for phosphorus, but what else? PFAS, I'm sure, right?
Yes, we test for a real large suite of tests. We do the 503 metals for all the biosolids. We do nitrite, nitrate, phosphorus, E. coli. It's a fairly broad arsenic, cyanide. It's a fairly broad list.
Can I ask about the specifics about chloride?
It's a good question. I'm not the lab person. I don't think we do, but I could get back to you.
That's a problem. A lot of wastewater comes through the facilities that come off the streets and whatnot in urban areas, so.
Not so much in South Burlington, but yes, because we are not a combined system in South Burlington. We're very lucky that I was the chief operator in Montpelier for 10 years prior to 2015. And yes, that is the correct statement. No, because it's a newer system. We don't have
Your particular system.
Yes, my particular system. We don't have CSOs and we were the first stormwater, so we have a separate system. So most of that is not, but we still have an I&I. When we had the huge drought here, 4 months ago, that was the best I&I study I've ever seen in my life. Every wastewater facility in the state now knows what their wastewater flows are. A lot of them don't have the money for the engineering, et cetera, but there's the numbers right there. We saw flows from the 90s. And, South Burlington's got a little bigger since the 90s. So we still have flow coming in from rain and infiltration inflow. But it was a really, not a good thing, but it was a good thing for data.
So fluoride would be a good thing to test for.
It would, and we may, and I'm sorry, I'll get back to you.
Okay, and what about pharmaceuticals?
So that's a hit and miss. They have gone through, we have worked with UVM. I'm actually giving a UVM tour at 10:30, 11:30. Hope the lab to start without me. And the state has gone through and done a few rounds of that. I know it was even interesting that you could actually see the fit that there was less coffee. Wastewater plants take about 90% of coffee as it goes through, but because UVM, so many people drink coffee that it actually, you can see it drop in the bay as the school's out. I wonder if the fish are getting a little jittery. It's just a joke.
No, I've just heard from at a tour at the Middlebury facility.
Yep. I used to work there in 2002.
When they empty septic tanks, when you empty a septic tank of somebody who's been on cancer treatments,
Yep.
their septic system is dead.
I've seen ones full of needles. Yep. I try to resist taking as much septic as I can. Many of them, like Montpelier, they need that revenue. Richmond especially needs the revenue of taking in septic. But if I was on a septic tank, I'd be concerned because as our limits go down, the first thing I'm going to cut off is the citizens of South Burlington should not have to pay increased cost we don't have septic tanks, Harley. Why, if we take in something that puts us over one of our limits, that's poor stewardship on my part for the citizens. So it's becoming more and more limited where it go.
Pharmaceuticals kind of hit and miss.
Sure.
About pesticides.
Pesticides. I know we've done a round of that. I don't think that we routinely test for that at all, that I know.
Sounds like we could do some.
Yes, there can always be increased and testings each, like we do our whole effluent toxicity testing. That's increased now to twice a year. So you basically, see how it impacts the river. There's a lot of tests that I would think about that we do right now. Appendix J is a whole bunch of grease, oils, Yeah. Sorry, I'm not the lab.
That's right. Thanks, Bob. Appreciate it.
Representative Pritchard.
Yeah, so I'm still hung up on this little graph thing here. So I'm looking at, one of the things that we've discussed is legacy phosphorus too.
Mhm.
So trying to understand, what is legacy and what is,
It's pretty hard.
yeah, it's pretty hard. But if you look at, again, Breck, if I'm looking at this correct, there are precipitous drops in phosphorus, huge drops in phosphorus on the chart that you show. In 1990, from 90 to 2000, the phosphorus levels decreased. There was a little uptick, they decreased again. There was a little uptick, and from 2000 to almost 2020, there was no, it was below those levels. So I'm trying to think what causes.
Well, I can't, I won't speak for Breck, is actually more of an expert, and so would Andrew on this, but storms, we've had the presentation meetings. We've gotten some of the large storms, we've gotten a quarter or more of the total yearly flow in a day or two. So,
Which
and
would
it's
certainly increase those levels.
Yeah, so is the storm, that also tears up the legacy, the stuff that's in the dirt and everything. So as the storm, so that's, like I always say, once again, the river turns brown, I do a lot of work and but the storm intensities seem to have increased somewhat, and that a lot of the loadings come in large chunks at once. Sorry, go ahead.
The ups and downs that you're seeing in these graphs, in all of these graphs, is a consequence of the annual conditions of flow. So if we have a very wet year, or if we have a very dry year like we just had this last year, that's going to affect the total amount of sediment and phosphorus that's being transmitted by rivers into the lake. So that's what's called the tributary loading. When you hear people talking about the legacy phosphorus, what they're referring to there is that a large portion of that phosphorus that's being loaded in every year drops out as sediment into the bottom of the lake, but it isn't gone at that point. It's still there, and it can be resurrected by natural processes that are going on in the sediment. So you have the new phosphorus being brought in by the tributaries every year, and then you have this legacy phosphorus that's a part of the sediment that's being resurrected, and the two of those add together to promote the growth of good algae, but under the right conditions, it can promote the growth of these cyanobacteria. How much of that occurs in any given year is going to be a consequence of how much rainfall you had that's delivering sediment and phosphorus, how warm it was in the lake, how windy it was in mixing the waters. And so year to year, we will get differences. What we're looking for is trying to pull those phosphorus levels down in all of the regions of the lake where it's above the dotted line, so we can keep those concentrations below levels that have been determined to increase the risk of cyanobacterial blooms.
Which in this part of the lake seems to be very, very good. It isn't a problem, which is so interesting. I mean, on your chart, it says it's good with no trend.
I think could you tell me what figure number that is? Maybe that would help me.
It's on page 5, and it would be right on the line that says cyanobacteria blooms.
Under
Okay.
ecosystem
Indicators.
Yeah, it doesn't have a number for a figure.
Okay, unfortunately, we're looking at different, I'm looking at an online version, not the version you have. So I'll have to look that up and get back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Tankovia.
Question about, you brought up a 53% failure figure.
Yes, for Lake George.
Yes.
I think that's
I have two
correct.
questions. One, my first question is about that. What were the reasons for failure?
That's a good question. I only know can you answer that, Lori, or anyone?
And were they obvious enough for people to realize that their septic systems were not working as designed?
Once again, I would guess not. They
Okay.
probably do not, unless it's ponding or you can see it quite obviously, you probably aren't gonna know.
Fail. And one
But that's a New York State agency, so I don't
Okay.
know that I can answer the first one, what their metrics were.
and one other, with respect to water treatment. What oxidizers, if any, do you use in water treatment?
Okay, so the majority of the state still uses chlorine. But they have to dechlor. We use ultraviolet disinfection. You have to have very clean water to be able to kill it with UV like we can. Montpelier also has UV where I came from. But traditionally, we all had chlorine gas. And then in the 80s or so, they realized that there weren't any fish or macroinvertebrates for a mile or two down all the wastewater plants. So in the 80s, they then made everyone dechlor. We then used sulfur dioxide to take the chlorine back out before it went out to the river. The chlorine gas, as I used to give the tours here in Montpelier, I won the governor's award and whatnot. Nobody cares. If I lose one of my tanks and I kill everyone in Montpelier, suddenly I'm the bad guy. So we switched. Everyone got rid of the gas and now they're using bleach basically, and then they still have to dechlor it. Well, no one knows we're there. It's the most expensive thing a citizen owns generally, that you actually own. And once again, you flush, it goes away, the sink comes on, it's on, you're happy. But there's a lot going into it. I gave a tour to the Lieutenant Governor and he was impressed. I always encourage you to come. I'd be glad to give a tour to anyone. I'll give you a tour to UVM class.
Thank you.
Any further questions or comments from the members? Rita.
Yeah, I know, shocking. So, the whole focus, I think, for the legislature and the administration is on housing, getting housing built. And being on the Environment Committee, I'm very cognizant of the fact that there's a tension in terms of, and I notice at wetlands, that you're, in terms of restoration and also climate resilience. And I don't want to ask you now, but I'm just wondering, are you thinking about how to balance it? Because we do need housing, and we do need to preserve, our environment, and just to have you think about what are the priorities if we have to choose. So I don't want to put you on the spot now, but I'm just hoping that we can hear from you about that.
Okay, thank you for bringing that up. And it's definitely something we've been tracking and taking, having presentations on and learning more about. And it's a real issue. So I recognize that.
Representative Michael.
Follow on with the housing and water treatment. How is the planning for expanding water treatment with respect to housing? Is the capacity built in first?
Yeah. So virtually everyone funds their stuff off the SRF list, the IUS or IUP intended use plan never has anywhere near the money to help all these facilities. These are extremely expensive upgrades. I just had a bid opening. We bonded for 34 million and I had 24 million left after doing some upgrades at the other one. I came in at 45 and 38.5. Yeah, I got some real issues. Montpelier bonded for 19 and theirs came in at 34. Everything is going through the roof, copper's through the roof. I got miles of copper. Everything is just going up and the cost is incredible. I just got back from Boston, from New England Water Environment Association. We had 3,000 members. I was the 2023 president, only the second from Vermont since 1929. It's no different when I go to Washington Water Week and I would meet with Senator Sanders and everyone else. I'm like, I'm not here like the nurses and the firemen looking for money. Yeah, I am. And there, there's a dollar and everybody wants that dollar, no money. And good.
Okay, thank you.
That's why I'm glad I'm not in the legislature.
Thank you so much.
With that,
Thank you.
Thank you. No, appreciate all the questions.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We're meeting to break time about live.
Boy, it was only say twice and it should be freezing for 5.
I've been saying.
Okay. Committee will go off, right?
I'm fine. I'm fine. I mean,
Yeah.
Well, you should have asked us questions. They are gonna bio, right?
Please come back by